Happy Monday. It's a busy Monday. We begin tonight with the war in Ukraine and President Trump's growing concern that Vladimir Putin may be as untrustworthy as he is brutal, and that all the Russian president's talk about a ceasefire has been just that, talk. Words devoid of any sincere desire to end the war. Now President Trump is preparing to shift from words to actions, issuing a ceasefire ultimatum to Putin. Make peace with Ukraine by Friday or face punishing U.S. sanctions. Trump says White House envoy Steve Witkoff is heading to Moscow as soon as Wednesday in what Ukraine is calling Russia's last chance to end the war. A Kremlin spokesman wouldn't confirm the meeting, but says Russia is, quote, always happy to see Trump's envoy, calling their contacts with him useful and important. The Kremlin also says Putin is willing to meet with Ukrainian President Zelensky if, and there's always an if Russia's preconditions are met. And he added, at this time, they are not. Zelensky called for a direct meeting with Putin just 3 days ago. But a top advisor in his office is urging the U.S. to go ahead with secondary sanctions, saying that Russia is losing momentum and new penalties from the U.S. could strangle Russia's economy. These sanctions would target countries buying Russia's oil, including China, India, and Turkey. But even President Trump admits it may not be enough to grind down Putin's war machine.
There'll be sanctions, but they seem to be pretty good at avoiding sanctions. You know, they're wily characters, and they're pretty good at avoiding sanctions. So we'll see what happens.
President Trump is already taking action against at least one major Russian oil importer. He posted on Truth Social today that he is substantially raising India's 25% tariff rate for buying and profiting off Russian oil, while people in Ukraine are killed by the Russian war machine. India responded by saying it has no plans to stop buying and reselling Russian oil and called the sanctions, quote, unjustified and unreasonable. As efforts to reach a ceasefire continue, so too does the fighting in Ukraine. And that is where we find NewsNation's Robert Sherman tonight, live for us in Kyiv. Robert, 3.5 years of war, and the bombs there are still dropping.
Just about every night here, Elizabeth, creating a constant state of fear and dread with no clear indication on the ground here that this will stop.
On the surface, Kyiv looks and feels like any other European city, but looks can be deceiving.
Because you know that you're in constant danger, it makes you understand that your life is in constant threat, and it just like fills you with this desperation and fear.
That fear yielding new rituals, like the nightly pilgrimage underground for many into the subway stations, just in case. It's hardly an excessive precaution. 3.5 years later, Kyiv's still coming under fire as Russia's missiles and drones rain down. Despite the air defenses, impacts are inevitable, and Ukrainians can only hope their homes and lives are spared. But those prayers are not always answered. The most recent major attack on Kyiv damaging districts across the capital, including a direct hit on an apartment building. Days of rescue crews combing through the rubble, looking for survivors. It's that same look on those countless faces that tell you all you need to know. Name by name, hour by hour, hope fades. Despite encouragement from loved ones to keep the faith, Katerina Naralnik already knows the truth.
My children are gone. They're not alive anymore.
It takes 3 days for the scope to come into focus. 31 killed, including 5 children. Over 150 more injured. Thursday morning's attack on Kyiv, the single deadliest since 2024. Other cities like Mykolaiv and Odessa hit as well in the following days, with heavy fighting ongoing in the east. All after President Trump announces new deadline of this weekend for Russia to move towards peace.
How common is this? How often do you have to respond to impacts on civilian sites like this?
Ordinary civilians are suffering every day.
And yet, in the shadows of war, life tries its best to go on.
based upon the scale of the attacks that people have seen here, there is low optimism that anything is going to come out of this deadline on Friday here, as many on the ground here believe at this juncture Russia isn't even interested in peace. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think a lot of people may share that suspicion. Robert Sherman, thank you. Turning now to the other agonizing war where ceasefire talks have also been stuck in quicksand, and that, of course, is the war in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is now moving toward a full military occupation of the Gaza Strip. That's according to reports from Israeli media. Israel's security cabinet is expected to meet tomorrow to make a formal decision, and even as the Israeli military is opposing this. It all comes as months of efforts to reach a ceasefire deal with Hamas have failed, and as at least 20 living hostages still remain with the militant group. Among them, of course, is 24-year-old Israeli Evyatar David. His family saw him in a video this weekend for the first time since March. He says he hasn't eaten in days and has barely had any water. Evyatar is a musician. On October 7th, 2023, he was at the Nova Music Festival in Israel when Hamas kidnapped him and more than 200 other people. Evyatar's family says Hamas is deliberately starving him, burying him alive as part of a propaganda campaign. A short time ago, I spoke with his cousin about his captivity and the efforts to end this war. Matan, first of all, thank you for joining us, and I'm so sorry to be talking to you under these circumstances. I know you've imagined what your cousin has been going through after all this time being held hostage in the tunnels, but this video out this weekend, you say it's even worse than what you imagined.
It's nothing we could have a picture. It's photos that we only recognize from the dark days of the 1940s. Even in our worst dreams, we can imagine him looking like that, being so thin, being so pale, without his signature smile, without any light in his eyes. I didn't imagine seeing my cousin so broken.
You said he doesn't look like himself, he doesn't sound like himself, and you just called back to the 1940s. He does look like somebody who was rescued from one of those death camps in World War II.
Yeah, it took, one of our cousins actually said that it took her a few seconds to actually realize it's not a dub of her or someone else, that it's actually our cousin. It's Evyatar speaking. He gave us horrible flashbacks to things we thought we were only going to see in pictures. It's hard. I feel like I'm seeing my cousin dying in front of my eyes in this video.
Evyatar's brother said that Evyatar is on the brink of absolute death. His father said, quote, "My child is dying. He is being deliberately starved."
Yeah. I think everyone can see that the way he looks like. You see that this is a dying person. You can see that he's been deliberately starved. Just in the glimpse, the moment where the terrorists give him the canned food, you can see the difference in the terrorist arm compared to Evyatar's arm. You can see that they are not eating the same food. They are not eating the same amount of food. The terrorist arm looks strong and like he has enough food to even spare. And Evyatar looks like he doesn't even remember what being full means. Like he doesn't remember what any feeling beside hunger and the being scared for your life means.
Another hostage who was held in that same tunnel with Evyatar, who was freed in one of the previous hostage deals, said he recognizes that tunnel. He knows exactly where he is, where Evyatar is. And he said that right next door, Hamas is in air-conditioned comfort with food they have managed to steal from aid deliveries into Gaza. Lots and lots of food and all the comforts that they are denying these hostages just a few feet away.
Yeah, I think Omer Venkrat said that, and he also said that he remember knowing that they have food because he could smell it. He could smell the smell of the food coming through the door. He saw how his captures are gaining weight during the time that he has only half a pita on good days and nothing on the bad days. And yeah, we can see they are not as hungry as him. They are standing behind an iron door where the difference between life and death is that door.
Outrage among Israelis is growing after the release of these videos. Israelis protesting the fact that these hostages still are being held. Evyatar's father says Prime Minister Netanyahu is refusing to do what he can to rescue him. What does he mean? What does he want the Prime Minister to do?
Well, I think his father means the same thing that we have been saying all along. Our Prime Minister needs to do whatever he can to make sure they come back. We usually say that the moment he'll do enough is the moment that they'll be here. And if they are not here yet, it means that he hasn't done enough to make sure they come back.
Well, Matan Eshet, I hope that your cousin continues somehow to survive this hellish existence that he is trapped in right now beneath Gaza. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about him tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, famine has been used as a weapon of war before, but rarely has it been exploited by one side of a conflict against its own people. And yet that is what some in Gaza believe Hamas is doing right now, prolonging and intensifying the humanitarian crisis in Gaza to turn the rest of the world against Israel. If that's truly the case, the strategy is working. Two key U.S. allies, Canada and France, say they will recognize Palestine as a state, and the U.K. will also do so by September if aid doesn't get through to Gaza in the next few weeks. And more than 1,000 rabbis and Jewish leaders from around the world have signed a public letter urging Israeli leadership to ensure more food gets through. Separately, a group of 600 retired Israeli security officials, including the former director of Mossad, have written to President Trump asking him to put more pressure on Netanyahu to end the war. Now, there's plenty of blame to go around for what is happening. Israel, which cut off all food for 2 months to Gaza, has now restricted the amount of food going into Gaza to a small fraction of what is needed. What is getting in is being distributed at just 4 places under heavy Israeli guard. People in Gaza must walk miles to get to those sites. Israel claims it has to do it this way because Hamas keeps stealing food. And although the U.S. government estimates that only happens to a small amount of the food, it is undeniable that some of it is being siphoned off to Hamas. Whichever side you care to villainize or to celebrate, Gazans continue to be shot to death just for trying to get something to eat. The situation is so dire that several countries have been directly airdropping flour, sugar, and canned goods into Gaza. And that in itself can be dangerous. Just today, there were reports that a nurse was killed when an aid package fell on him from above. And as in any war where disinformation can be rife, it can be hard to get a sense of what's actually happening on the ground. On Friday, we talked to a former British Army officer who was recently at an air aid zone in the Gaza Strip.
When the site is opened up, you can see behind me in that image there that just a horde of hungry people descending on the aid, trying to get what they can. There's enough food in there. It's just not reaching people because it's being intercepted by Hamas and other militants.
It is worth noting that very few people agree there is enough food in Gaza right now. Joining me now for more on this is the Gazan analyst I just mentioned, Ahmed Ahmed, you're going to have to say your last name for me, please.
No problem. Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib.
Thank you, Ahmed. He is a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council. His recent article is headlined, "Hamas Wants Gaza to Starve." Also joining us is former Israeli diplomat Alon Pinkas. Great to have both of you. Alon, before we get into the humanitarian crisis, we did report at the beginning of this story on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to go to a full-scale occupation of Gaza, even though his own military opposes it. A source to the prime minister says there will be operations even in areas where the hostages are being held. If the IDF chief of staff doesn't agree, he should resign.
Yeah, I mean, look, the IDF has been opposed to this from basically day one, Elizabeth. And the IDF basically said, even the previous chief of the general staff basically said that if you want to rid Gaza of Hamas, if you want to annihilate, decimate, eviscerate, obliterate, all these euphemisms that Mr. Netanyahu spurts out like fortune cookie slips, that's fine. But in order to do that, you need to occupy the entire Gaza Strip. And if you occupy the entire Gaza Strip, Elizabeth, you own the entire Gaza Strip. And that includes humanitarian aid and potable water and medical services and law and order and education and employment and reconstruction and what have you. That's what occupation looks like. For almost a year, Mr. Netanyahu thought he was, walking between the raindrops and not getting wet. He's occupying, but not really. He's controlling, but not legally. The IDF controls 75 or more % of Gaza. That makes Israel responsible for the humanitarian aid. Everything
And just very quickly, Alon, the reason, I mean, and we obviously we're going to get to the humanitarian crisis there in just a moment. Obviously, and they're not even handling the 75% of Gaza they control. They're still not allowing enough food and potable water inside. But Alon, the danger, according to the IDF, is that Hamas will execute these hostages if the IDF approaches these areas that they have not yet approached. How extraordinary is it that Netanyahu's own military is against this?
Very extraordinary. Certainly at a time, certainly during a war when the fighting is still raging, for the military to basically confront the prime minister is not rare. It's almost unprecedented and unheard of. And this goes back, I know we don't have time and I'd love to hear what. This goes back to something very fundamental from the outset of the war, Elizabeth, and that is that Israel never had any coherent and orderly plan for the day after in Gaza. This is a war that started without political objectives, and all military moves on operations were never aligned with any discernible political end, and this is what you get.
Ahmed, you've been speaking to Palestinians who are right now trapped in Gaza, where you say chaos and apocalyptic scenes are the norm now. You say Israel is actually playing into Hamas's hands because Hamas wants the famine, because you say producing mass death is its final play.
Precisely that. I mean, unfortunately, Hamas is out of options, and the only thing that it has going for it right now is to draw Israel further into the quagmire, is to cause Israel to actually worsen the conditions for the civilians by the restricting of the aid, by being more brutal and inhumane in the application of firepower, in the way that it handles how to move populations from one area to the other, by the way in which it conducts crowd control, for example, outside of GHF, that's the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites.
Where they're giving out the food.
Precisely. And where hundreds of people have been documented to have been shot en route to and from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation distribution sites. There are dozens and dozens of horrendous imagery emerging every single day of airstrikes, of people being shot by ammunition, not by explosions and bombs, but by actual live rounds from Israeli tanks for nothing. They are losing their lives. This is not weakening Hamas. This is not bringing the hostages home. Instead, it is worsening Israel's standing and producing these awful images that Hamas is counting on to further isolate Israel in the international arena, to further implicate Israel in accusations of war crimes and genocide. And starvation and hunger is yet another part of Hamas's toolbox, if you will. And I would argue, like I wrote in the piece in The Atlantic, is the final play for Hamas to draw Israel all in. And I am exceptionally concerned that this idea of occupying Gaza fully is the final play, I mean, in what will be a disastrous decision, because similarly, once you withdraw, who's going to take over security? Who are you gradually going to delegate those responsibilities to? And like General David Petraeus of the United States Central Command when he was in Iraq and Afghanistan, how are you going to, you know, the famous strategy of clear, hold, and build? Is Israel actually going to build, or is it just going to oversee a pile of ruins and somehow hope that that is sufficient to retrieve the hostages and destroy Hamas?
And this is something the IDF has been pointing out from the very start, almost since October 7th. What is the plan for after we defeat or obliterate or decimate Hamas? And by the way, we had the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. on this show. I asked him point blank why the IDF was using live rounds of ammunition for crowd control around these food distribution sites. He did not answer the question. Gentlemen, I would love to have both of you back. This is not an issue, I fear, that is going to go away soon. I really appreciate a smart discussion of it tonight.
Thank you,
Elizabeth.
All right, coming up for us, we're going to switch gears. A violent brawl in downtown Cincinnati is fueling a raging debate about public safety, the bystander effect, and police readiness. Ohio gubernatorial candidate Vivek Ramaswamy says he has solutions. He's holding a town hall for concerned residents tonight, and we're there live. And then later, a trove of new documents were released today about Brian Kohberger and the Idaho College murders. What exactly was Operation Turtle Shell? NewsNation's Brian Enton has been digging into it, and he'll join us in a bit. We turn from violence overseas to violence on our own streets, specifically the streets of Cincinnati, where Ohio gubernatorial candidate Vivek Ramaswamy is hosting a town hall for concerned residents after that bloody street brawl was caught on camera last week. Public outrage continues over why the fight escalated so quickly, why only one person called police, and how incidents like this can be prevented in the future. We're going to show you some of the brawl, but a warning, it is violent. One woman ended up being punched to the ground and knocked out. Blood was dripping from her mouth. That woman, named Holly, said this weekend that she has brain trauma, and she thanked the community for its support. But that community is torn over exactly how to address this incident and what to do next. NewsNation investigative correspondent Rich McHugh is live in Cincinnati outside that Vivek Ramaswamy town hall. Rich, before we get to the town hall, we just found out that the man accused of punching Holly was just arrested. What do we know?
That's exactly right, Elizabeth. So 2 hours ago, Cincinnati Police's Fugitive Apprehension Unit, working alongside the FBI, Atlanta FBI, apprehended him in Fulton County, Georgia. He is 38-year-old Patrick Rosemond. They've charged him with 2 counts of felony assault and aggravated riot. And sources here in the city tell us this is the suspect who is believed to be involved in the beating of that woman, Holly, the victim, Holly. So he is going to be extradited back to Cincinnati momentarily. Now, here at the Ramaswamy event, We were here just before he arrived at about 5:30. There was crowds stretched all the way down the block, hundreds of people. They could not let everybody in. There was an overflow crowd in the back. Once inside, Ramaswamy spoke about Holly. Take a listen.
I talked to Holly as recently as yesterday. My wife is actually a throat surgeon at the cancer hospital at the James at Ohio State, and so Holly had suffered some neck injuries. We wanted to be helpful. I had people criticizing me for having the gall to call one of the victims, and one of the things that shocked me was 3 days after the attack, Holly told me that not a single elected statewide or even local elected official had called her at that point in time. And it just, I think, shows a little bit of out-of-touch leadership.
Ramaswamy spoke again and again about the need for more accountability and more police so that people here in Cincinnati can once again feel safe on the streets at night again. Elizabeth?
All right, Rich McHugh, thanks so much. Joining me now is the president of Cincinnati's Fraternal Order of Police, Ken Kober. Ken, thanks so much for coming on the show. You know, the most incredible part of this story is that police only learned of this horrific attack after bystanders posted videos of it on social media. Those people just stood there and recorded the attack.
Yeah, thanks for having me. They just had one 911 call saying that there was an assault that occurred. And it wasn't until some of these videos started surfacing to see what the magnitude of this really was.
6 people have now been charged. Almost all of them are now arrested. One of them just this afternoon, all the way in Georgia. They were all given high bonds to post to get free, up to $150,000. You support this. Why?
Well, the judges have to send a message to these people that want to commit these heinous crimes, that if you do this, you're going to get locked up. And unfortunately, it just doesn't happen enough. But when I saw the judges that were going to be in room A last week and this week, it didn't surprise me that this was going to be the outcome.
The woman, Holly, who was knocked unconscious during the brawl, is now speaking out. This weekend, she spoke up for the first time to thank the community. The images of her injuries are truly awful. The city announced that police will now be more visible downtown, that they'll be on foot, on segways, on bike patrols. Will this help?
Well, anytime you can increase visibility, it's going to help. People aren't going to commit these brazen acts if there's a police officer there. Unfortunately, we're so short-staffed that we can't be everywhere all the time.
What is the staffing situation like there? I mean, why are you so short-staffed?
So we've been anywhere from 180 to 200 officers short. Right now, we're about 110, 120 officers short. Part of it comes down to things that our city council did years ago, where we didn't hire anybody for 6 years. And now we're seeing people retiring. They're leaving early just because the climate hasn't been the best. And unfortunately, this is the reality of where we are. They're doing what they are trying to do to hire more officers, but that all takes time.
When you say the climate isn't the best, do you mean not supportive of police activity?
Well, sure. I mean, we saw what went on in 2020, where cops were absolutely villainized, and officers that were around then certainly haven't forgotten that. And the reality is they're getting to as soon as they have 25 years on, they're just retiring. They're not staying longer because they just, at this point, think it's not worth it.
Yeah, as we can see from this town hall that Vivek Ramaswamy is holding, this has become a big political issue. Lots of politicians are weighing in. Vice President Vance, his brother, who's running for Ohio governor. But I was very struck by the fact that one city council member, a woman named Victoria Parks, actually said they asked for that beat down. What do you make of that kind of reaction to this video that we're watching on the screen right now?
Well, somebody like that makes some kind of comment, they have no business being an elected official. And I know other council members have had similar sentiments, saying that there's absolutely no reason she should be in office. She should step down immediately. If that's going to be your attitude, to victim shame somebody, then you have no business being an elected official.
Yeah. All right. Ken Kober from the Fraternal Order of Police. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the work you do, keeping the streets safe.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Coming up for us, 2 suspected killers on the run, 2 manhunts hot on their trail as police hunt one murder suspect in Montana. Investigators in Tennessee are chasing another who is accused of killing 4 family members but sparing a baby. leaving the child in a random person's lawn. We're going to have that story coming up. Two regions are on high alert amid two manhunts in two violent crimes, roughly 2,000 miles apart. In Tennessee, a third person is now charged as an accessory in a quadruple murder in the small town of Tiptonville, about 125 miles from Memphis. The murder suspect is actually on the run. Authorities are now offering a $30,000 reward for help catching 28-year-old Austin Drummond. They say he may have crossed state lines since 4 family members were murdered on Tuesday, found in the woods. A baby, the child of 2 of the victims, was found alive miles away in a car seat, all alone in the front yard of a random home. Meanwhile, in Montana, the search is on for a suspect authorities say shot and killed 4 people at a bar Friday night, a rare violent crime in the town of Anaconda. Suspect Michael Brown is an Army veteran and now is a fugitive. Large rewards are on the table also in this case for information leading to his arrest. Joining us now is Art Roderick, retired U.S. Marshal with 40 years experience in federal and local law enforcement. Art, let's start with the case in Tennessee. Special agents arrested a third person in connection to the search for Austin Drummond. What do we know about these so-called associates who are accused of being accessories after the fact? They helped Drummond escape?
Yes, absolutely. Or helped them escape or helped them do something overt, either supply money or possible rides to a different location. So they provided some assistance to him after he committed these crimes. Now, the interesting thing about the Drummond case is he has apparently big ties to the Vice Lords, which is one of the largest street gangs in the United States, basically started out of Chicago. And I'm wondering if these 3 individuals that have been picked up as accessories after the fact are also associated with that type of gang. So really, I think the key is going to be picking him up and getting closer on this timeline as to where he was on a specific date. And it sounds like that's exactly what they're doing in this case.
Well, and with these gang ties, he undoubtedly might have help in other states as well. He was out on bond when the murders occurred.
Yeah, you know, I look at our criminal justice process and we seem to be failing at every level, whether it's on the correction side, whether it's on the prosecution side, or even the law enforcement side. So a lot of these cases have to deal with that. Here's an individual that should have never been let out of jail. He should have remained in jail. In fact, I think there's an actual prosecutor that had written a letter to try to keep him in jail. And of course, that failed. The parole board let him out. But there's also a connection in the jail with a possible connection in the jail with somebody that's related to the family that he allegedly killed.
Right.
So it's
apparently,
to see.
The victims were related to his cellmate or somebody he met inside the jail. It's hard to believe, though, that based on that, he would just go out and murder 4 people.
I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of information that hasn't been found yet, or at least it hasn't been made public. And law enforcement's got to be very careful because, you know, if this individual, when this individual is found, I mean, they're going to have to prosecute this case. So they don't want to let out too much information right now. Enough information to keep the public safe and to possibly follow up on leads.
All right, quickly turning to the manhunt in Montana. We still don't know what motivated Brown to allegedly walk into the Owl Bar and shoot and kill 4 people. He was a regular bar patron. He lived next door. He's an Army veteran, though, and this is key, who struggled with mental health issues. His own niece described him as, quote, very sick.
Yeah, this is another sad case up in that area. I mean, we're still looking for Travis Decker in Washington State, and this individual does have some connection to Washington State, but I also think he's probably a very good candidate for suicide. But you know, this individual, the 2 cases are very similar to Decker in that we're talking about a very rough, rugged terrain area where we've got to look for these individuals. And I know the marshals are involved in all 3 of these cases, but You know, this type of case is very difficult just due to the rugged terrain and you know, his ability to remain alive in that type of environment.
Right, they're using drones and infrared heat-seeking technology, but this is a very popular tourist area, this mountain where they think he is. It's heavily forested, lots of tourists there, and it's the height of tourist season in western Montana. Let's hope they find him before anything else happens.
Exactly, yep.
Art Roderick, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
All right, coming up on America's fastest growing cable channel, he may be in prison for life, but convicted quadruple killer Bryan Kohberger is still making headlines. We got our hands on new documents released today in connection to the case. Brian Entin joins us live next to break down what we've learned. Brand new documents related to quadruple murderer Bryan Kohberger have just been released, and they reveal just how concerned authorities were that Kohberger himself would be murdered while in custody. Our own Brian Entin has spent the last few hours combing through the documents. We're also learning more about the conditions that Kohberger will face at the Idaho Supermax. Sorry, I'm just choking on some water. The Idaho Supermax prison, including 1 hour of recreation a day in a chain-linked cage that is often, quote, littered with human waste. Brian Entin joins us now. Brian, let's start with the documents. What did you uncover?
Yeah, Elizabeth, since the gag order ended, we've been getting this trickling of documents that have been coming out. The latest is from Pullman, Washington, and these really focus on when Bryan Kohberger was brought in from Pennsylvania after his arrest. You remember he was arrested at his parents' house in Pennsylvania. They flew him to Pullman, Washington on this very small single-engine prop plane where he landed in Pullman. It took forever, by the way. We thought it'd be like an FBI jet or something, but it was a small plane, finally landed in Pullman, Washington, and these new documents show that they were really concerned that someone might shoot or injure Kohberger. They actually called it Operation Turtle Shell because he was wearing a helmet and a ballistic vest. You might remember when he got off the plane, he had the helmet, the vest. I think we might have video of it. And they had police stationed all around. And it was really, really just an intricate plan that they came up with that was really detailed in these new documents, Elizabeth.
What else do we know about the Idaho Supermax, where Kohberger is expected to spend the rest of his life?
Yeah, so he's now in the J block, which is a certain part of the Idaho Supermax. You remember I toured it a couple of weeks ago. This is actually an area that I wasn't allowed to see because this is also where death row is. So they've got him in J block, right next to the death row inmates. He's totally secluded, basically doesn't have any interaction with anyone except when he's let out 1 hour a day. And he doesn't even get to shower every day, Elizabeth. He showers every other day. When he's brought out, he has all his meals, by the way, in the cell, but when he's brought out that 1 hour a day, he's shackled. They take him to a small, sort of like fenced-in, totally enclosed outdoor area, which I did see. Sometimes they even have to go into a cage within the fenced-in outdoor area. And this is where I'm told he will remain, at least for now, while they continue to sort of sort out where he will end up in this Supermax prison, Elizabeth.
Yeah, it's called one of the worst prisons in America for a reason, apparently. Brian Entin, thank you so much. Coming up, Chris Cuomo will join me to preview his conversation with James Carville and Stephen A. Smith. Coming up next. All right, Chris Cuomo joins me now. Chris is going to have James Carville and Stephen A. Smith coming up on your show, but I know you're also talking about what's going on in Israel. I just interviewed cousin of Eviatar David, who was in that horrific video released over the weekend. His cousin actually told me he looked like a survivor from one of the Nazi death camps.
Because he basically is, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what Hamas is a bunch of extreme Islamists that wants to destroy Jews, no different than the intentions of the Nazis. This is just how you demonstrate your hatred. And people have to help me understand, if you care about the suffering in Gaza, why don't you care about this as well? Yeah. It's a fair criticism when you reverse it and say, hey, if people care about what happened in Israel, why don't they care about what's happening in Gaza right now? The two go together. But we keep seeing these extremist exercises, especially for those with an affinity for a social media generated genocide.
Right, but two things can be true. Two things can be true.
Yes.
Hamas can be horrible, evil villains who are committed to, genocide of Jews, and Israel could be not letting enough food into Gaza and playing into Hamas's aims here, because they're just.
And that is exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
And you nailed it. Both of those things are ongoing, and it keeps going on. Why? I don't think people want it to end. I don't. I think this works for Hamas. I think it works for Bibi. I don't think it works for Israel. I think my Jewish brothers and sisters are getting beat up, and I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. And I don't think that the stigma is going to go away anytime soon.
Although we did just have the Arab League come out and denounce Hamas finally. Only 668 days too late, or however many days it's been.
Right. And they're doing it with this and not with this.
Yeah.
Because when Israel gets out, who's going to come in? Who's going to rebuild? Who's going to occupy? Who's going to provide all the things that Israel does? Who's going to step up? We'll see.
We'll see. All right, listen, have a great show.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.